This podcast and any written materials related to it represent the opinions of Lisa Kays and Paula D. Atkinson, and our guests to the show and any written materials. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. It is for informational and educational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Feels like it's been forever.
I know. It's been a long time. I hope everyone had a lovely summer, although this will probably come out in the fall. So I hope everyone's having a lovely fall. You are listening to What If Nothing's Wrong With You. I am Paula D. Atkinson.
I am Lisa Kays.
Welcome back. We have a fun episode for you today. We're going to talk about sobriety and 12 steps and all the differences that's going on in terms of, I'm always excited about the much more nuanced, expansive way we talk about sobriety now, which you're about to find out, than when Lisa and I worked at a drug and alcohol clinic in the late 1900s, it seems like, but it wasn't that long ago, but it seems like it was. But first we're going to get into some chit chat. Lisa, you have many Indigo Girls related updates, so please get into it.
I have updates. Mostly I have a confession. So first of all, the Indigo Girls have a documentary, for anyone who doesn't know, called It's Only Life After All. Have you seen it, Paula?
No, I am putting it on my phone because I'm getting on a plane on Sunday and I am going to watch it on a plane.
It is a healing watch. And not only just because their story is so amazing, but what I loved about it is they own, I don't know that I've ever seen I don't watch a lot of documentaries about bands or art, but like they talk about their mistakes. Like they fully own, like Amy goes into like, because they were getting this like horrible press from this like critic, and they show clips of like how she talked about it at shows, and she's like, oh, an emotionally mature person would not, and it's this like and they talk about conflict between them, and like Amy kind of, anyway, I don't want to spoil it, but it just, since I'm in an era where I'm now learning to like hold myself gently while also being like, that wasn't my favorite. Like, I'm glad I grew out of that phase. And like watching them do that, these people that I hold as these like perfect, I'm like, you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
They're so healing. They talk about such complexity around like gender and their sexuality and like what they realized about that, their growth anyway, I'm not going to spoil it. It is one of the most healing things I have experienced in a very long time. I mean, recommend 2 thumbs up.
Of course, the Indigo Girls are going to give us yet another corrective emotional experience by just existing. And God bless them.
And to connect that to therapy, I was in a group today where I owned something I screwed up in the group. Just fully, I was like, you know what? I've been evolving in my thinking. I screwed this up. I let you down. This is like, and somebody said like, that was so amazing. Like watching you just there, because they said, they were like, I view you as kind of perfect, but it was actually really, which is hilarious, but it was actually really helpful to see you be like, oh, I'm a person and I make mistakes and I can just own them. And I feel like we are trained to never do that. And the more I do that, it is so liberating for me and everyone around me. Let's all just go around owning our mistakes all the time. Just all the time.
I did the same thing yesterday. One of my groups were going through something and I was like, I've never done this before. We're all in this together. You guys tell me if you don't feel held or protected by me, and I will correct it immediately and we'll talk about it. But we're in this that's sort of like, this is like Brene Brown shit, right? Like leading with rather than power with instead of power over, right? Like we're in this together. This is our group. Yeah. You tell me when I shit the bed and I'll say, oh, okay, I probably did shit the bed. Great.
Because I can't help you not sink into shame and worthlessness.
Right.
If you make a mistake, if I do that too, or if I get defensive. I can't, how can I help you with that? If I can't model it. It is so liberating. I'm here for all of it. All I want to talk to anyone about is how I've screwed everything up. So there's that.
I just want
Thank
to
you.
apologize.
Just apologize for the rest of my life. So
I'm
thank
in an
you to the
apology
Indigo
tour.
Girls for
Yes.
that. But speaking of apologizing,
Yes.
so I'm like, so
You do owe Nimeka and I an apology about this.
I owe everyone, and I will say I have a friend, a therapist friend I went to the concert with, and she and I were like in the shame closet, like, what is wrong with us? So the Indigo Girls are frequently touring with other artists now. I believe this might be because Emily's voice is up with the voice. It's shown in the document, whatever. So I think, but hey, I don't mind. The Indigo Girls and Ani DeFranco, yes, please.
Yes, please. Sign me up.
This year, it was the Indigo Girls and Melissa Etheridge.
Amazing.
What I need to confess is I don't even know how to talk about it. I didn't know who Melissa Etheridge was. I mean, I was like, I know her. I was like, what songs am I going to know? And everybody I was with was like, what's wrong? What? And then she came out and I was like, oh, I'll just like, it's going to be like country music and I'll like tolerate it. And then she came out and I was like, she's very funny. And I think I texted you and I was like, did you know Melissa Etheridge is funny? And you were like, Lisa, she's like a middle-aged queer. And I was like, she's queer?
Oh my God! What are you talking?
My friends and this other therapist who I do feel like I need to have a partner in this, all of our friends are just like, how do you, a fan of like folk rock, women's, like
you
I
are
like
the
Patti
queen of
Smith.
lesbian folk rock. Yes.
I did not know Melissa Etheridge was a queer middle-aged. I thought she was like a country. I don't know. I thought she was like a country. I thought she was singing all her songs about boys.
She's never sung about a man ever in her life.
She also wrote a song for women in the Leavenworth prison. I am from Missouri. She's from Kansas. And one of my favorite things is music that appeals to, because I worked in a women's prison, speaking of very bad rehab situations. And like, I constantly made playlists in my mind for them. I saw how they interacted with music. I have like their rehab playlists like in my phone still. And then she sings this song she's written for women in prison. It is called I'm Not Broken. It should be the theme song of this podcast if we could afford it.
How much does that cost to make
how much is that? Research that. I was like, how do I not know this woman walks? I apologize. I don't know what has happened. I did not know.
Were you? I'm so confused. You were born in 1976, correct? And you have been a queer adjacent.
I know. Come to my window. I told David. I was like, all of her songs seem to be about coming to a door or a window. Like she does seem to have a theme. They're all about coming home or go here. But I thought she was just a country music. I apologize. I own it. I don't know what happened.
That's crazy. I mean, welcome to the world of Melissa Etheridge. She's great. Her voice is the thing I love about Melissa Etheridge. I don't love all of her songs. In fact, I hate the song Come to My Window, but mostly because my college roommate, it was her and her boyfriend song. And I was like, you can't have that song. She's a lesbian. But her voice is incredible and she can wail on the guitar.
Okay. No, not just that. What I need to talk about for a moment, it's on my Instagram account and I'm not a person who really understands music. Like I appreciate it, but I don't understand. Paula, for like 20 minutes, she co-drummed with her drummer.
Oh,
they were rotating around the drum set together I was like, what, how my mind was like, she is an extraordinary musician. Yeah. How is she not famous? She should be famous.
Well, she is.
She's really talented. Someone should put her on a tour and give her.
She should have a record deal or something. Oh, she has since 1985. She has actually. Yeah,
she's astounding.
I'm just wondering, do you think that you thought it was Emmylou Harris? Do you think that you got those people mixed up?
I don't know what I thought.
Okay,
I thought she was just like a country singer singing songs to boys. That's all I have. That's what I thought. I wouldn't even, if she'd walked up to me on the street, I would have had no idea.
Oh my God. How would you not hug her? I'd have to hug her.
No.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, welcome. I love that. I mean, this is just such an indication that at 48 years old, you can still be surprised and you can still fall in love with a Midwest lesbian folk rock lady. That's awesome. Also reminds me of my beloved little Chapel Roan, also from Missouri, by the way.
Yes. And yes, we'll have to talk about at some point how my son is coping with the Grammy nominations because they're all his favorite. He's not okay.
That nobody.
It's all his favorites.
That's all his favorites, right?
I get, I mean, I was
love
like,
that there's no men, zero.
No. And I was like,
boys,
I don't know how to tell you this, but this is going to be a rough experience for you.
That somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose.
Yeah.
Just tell him it's all a scam, and if they have a lot of curse words in them. But if he wants to listen to some Beyonce, Jay-Z songs about how the Grammys are deeply fucked up, then I'll send you some songs.
We may need those after whatever the outcome is. I don't even know. He doesn't even know what to hope for. It's a difficult time.
Okay, it's a hard time for little David. We wanted to also touch on if you have a therapist, which we assume you do, and that's why you're listening to this podcast, or you are a therapist, we wanted to talk about the CPT codes fiasco, CDB,
scandal of our day.
CBT oil, whatever. This is so dumb. So I didn't realize that it's actually it's not. So Simple Practice sent an email to all of us. So if you have a therapist, he, she, they may use Simple Practice. It wanted us to pay to use the CPT code. So if this is not the ultimate illustration.
Because the AMA, so these are the medical for Nameka and anyone else who doesn't the medical codes, the numeric like NO90853 is group therapy. Blah, 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 blah is your, pap smear. Like those numbers that are used to code your bills at a doctor's appointment, the AMA charges money for the use of those codes.
Yeah.
And you can't not use the codes. My husband is an antitrust lawyer. I'm going to run this by him.
Oh, good.
Is this allowed? Because we can't. It's not like I can bill it and just be like, oh, it's a vaginal exam. I don't want to use your codes. That's
right.
What it was.
You have to use them.
It's a monopoly.
So it is it's capitalism capitalizing on the horrors of capitalism. So like every one of my clients is suffering from capitalism. And then I have to use capitalism that's using capitalism to treat their capitalism. Like it's the most chasing the tail. Like we are so at the end stages of the empire crumbling. We are so at the end stage. Like none of it makes sense anymore. It's like I can't stop thinking about like criminalizing homelessness. Like, oh, we're at the end. It is the end of days. Like now the people who are poor because the guy needed more yachts are now criminals because they're poor. Like this is the end.
We're at the end, guys. And nothing will light up a therapist listserv more than charging. I said, Paula, I was like, "Oh, it's activated." Like,
the listserv is on fire.
Activated. People were in there. They're in their feelings. They're having a lot of feelings, as they should. I was like, "What nonsense is this?" I liked your response of, "I hate it here."
I hate it here.
And I did want to say, if you're annoyed at how expensive therapy is, this is the stupid. I mean, it's like the cost of being a therapist just keeps. Yeah. It is not. It used to be kind of a cheap thing to do. We get hit with like these fees, and $20 a year sounds like not a lot, but like every year, I'm like, I am paying. So I just want people to be aware of that. That like. If you're like, oh, my therapist is just hoarding all this money, it's like we pay a lot in these for this stupid. Our continuing education is bananas.
Licensing fees, all of it.
And continuing education, it's now so like you have to have this one and an anti-oppression, but an anti-racist, but it has to be implicit bias, and it has to be taken on the third Tuesday of this month, but that has to be opposite the one that you have to do on the LGBTQ, and it's like. Wow. And every state is different, and we're all licensed in multiple states. And by the time you've paid
because all of our clients moved
And by
during the pandemic, right?
And by the time I've paid for all these CEUs, that are like, I am fine with anti-oppression CEUs, to be clear. That's like all I want anyway. But it's like, by the time you've done these ones that they make you do, it's like there's not even room left to learn anything actually. I don't want to say anti-oppression CEs are not, but they're so specific in the kind, and usually they're not being given. Now people are starting to do them well, but for
have fun doing
years,
them.
it was like, it's just... and then LGBT, like gay people having to take CEUs on gay people. I mean, what?
I know.
I'm like, what?
Right? I have new colleagues here in Palm Springs that have been HIV positive since the 90s, since the 80s, and they have to take HIV education, and they're like
there's
I
no
have to get this.
Yeah. There's no distinguished, like there's an exception if you have some lived experience.
If you've if you've been on HIV meds since 1985, yes, you probably don't need this.
Right. And these boards that are like, take your 15,000 anti-oppression CEs. By the way, we're going to still make you take this super racist ASWB exam that we are so married to. But no, that's neither here nor there. Be sure to take your implicit bias. I'm like, all right.
But if you take a CE about implicit bias, you won't notice that our exam is completely racist. Speaking of toxic, awful things. So this happened about a month ago, but our beloved friend Shannon Doherty left this earthly plane. And I think she struggled with cancer off and on for years, I feel like 20 years.
I don't know, but it seems like a very long
I feel like she got
battle.
breast cancer in her 30s. I just remember being like, whoa, she's so young. And one of the things that Lisa and I did some research on was how many narcissists were in her life. Because as we've talked about on this podcast, and our friend Gabor Mate, who I have mixed feelings about, who
I love unconditionally.
I have very mixed feelings about, because he hates fat people, but
I don't love that.
But he talks about how oftentimes, and I don't want to get into some Gwyneth Paltrow, woo-woo, you can heal yourself by just not being around toxic people. That sounds like white lady nonsense. But there is some wisdom in that the people who spend a lot of their time and or are married to people who have narcissist personality disorder will make your life awful and make your health awful. And the intersection of cancer, autoimmune disorders,
inflammation, high blood pressure. And if we expand the lens, what he does in his latest book, whether he hates the big-bodied people or not, which I did not know. So much that I don't know about the world, as we know, as we just discussed, that people encountering on a systemic level, it's racism, right? It's sexism. Like if you, those things we can't escape. So we're not blaming anyone, but that there is now overwhelming data that if you are constantly suppressing anger, irritation, ruminating because you're in something that is unjust, your body becomes ill. The data he has is, I just finished the book. It's unbelievable. So then,
yes, of course.
Poor Shannon.
I mean, when you think about, and because I always talk about this from a fat phobic lens, right? That it is impossible for us to know, but it is good for us to question whether a fat body is unhealthy because fat makes us unhealthy, or a fat body is unhealthy because of the constant fat phobia that you have to live in. And the constant, as I say it with my fat clients or clients who live in large bodies, is the constant violation and the violence of people violating your body and your boundaries because your body is the quote unquote wrong size. And as a society, we have decided that if somebody's body is the quote unquote wrong size, those people deserve to be violated on a constant basis, which is true of people of color, which is true of women, which is true of trans people, which is true of so many people. And Shannon happened to have been married to a couple narcissists, and she had them around, which makes so much sense because we all thought she was a bitch in the 80s. And what I'm realizing more and more is I think every woman that was called a bitch in the 80s was just not putting up with people's shit and or dealing with a lot of shit and didn't have the capacity to deal with other shit.
And probably being told not to eat. at the same time.
Oh, well,
like, were they
definitely
eating
spoke.
at the 90210 diner? No one was eating.
No,
And
zero.
what led me to send you the email that was like, oh my God, I think she died of toxic narcissism or was that there was this story about how, so her exes were horrible. There was like a horrible divorce battle.
Yeah.
And her business manager, who I am not diagnosing with anything, but he forgot to pay her health insurance premium, which is why her cancer didn't get diagnosed. And then he had this protracted, the whole thing just smells like all these protracted legal battles, what she went through just trying to get people to like take care of her fundamentally. I was just like, this smells like maybe a scooch of narcissism was like in her world. And like, look, cancer can come from a lot of places, but I was like, I don't know, man. I just wonder if it killed her because, I mean, literally the guy not paying her health insurance premium, they know that probably caused her cancer. It was so progressed when they found it.
And also that she signed her divorce papers like 36 hours before she died. Did you hear that part?
No, I didn't know
She
that.
signed the divorce paper like right before, like hours before she left her earthly body.
To protect her assets and stuff?
I don't know. I don't know if it was protect her assets or it's because she was like, before I leave this earth, I will divorce this man.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and just thinking about like, if Shannon Doherty can't get health insurance, like, again, back to like, this is the end.
We're at the end.
If you can be on 90210 and be Shannon Doherty and
Charmed.
And I don't even know about, obviously I don't know about that, but I was probably in the Peace Corps then. But you know what I mean? And like, you're like, can't make your Obamacare premium. We are done. Did you hear about the Olympians? The Olympians that were getting free healthcare in France and TikToking it. And then all the other Olympians were like, we feel so bad for these Americans. Like they don't have any healthcare. It's so embarrassing. They're like, you guys, I went to the dentist. You're an elite athlete being sponsored by the United. What?
That Flava Flav has to pay your healthcare premiums. This is where we are.
This is where we are as a country. You have to rise to the level in a sport to get the attention of Flava Flav in order to get like donated healthcare. This is where we are. Yeah, it's so weird that people are anxious. It's weird.
I know that people that have anxiety disorders. I also, just for two side things, love that in the 90s, would any of us have guessed that Snoop Dogg and Flava Flav would be the beloved grandpas of the generation? Absolutely not.
Or hanging out with Martha Stewart.
Obsessed.
Snoop Dogg is hanging out with Martha Stewart. What's
obsessed?
Happening?
Also, did anybody think about the intersection of Sha'Carri Richardson not being able to compete because she had weed in her system and then hiring Snoop Dogg to be the announcer? Hello?
I did not think about that, but that's good. That's good.
Like, what? Again.
Mixed There's some systemic, perhaps, issues going on.
Yeah. Mixed messages. I wanted to announce in terms of Shannon Doherty and toxic people, the oldest woman alive says she made it to 115, surviving both world wars and 2 pandemics by avoiding toxic people. Her words.
We don't need to even say anything else. You don't need to read Dr. Gabor Mate's tome that is 1,000,000 pages long.
It is really long.
That's what the tome is about. That is it. That headline.
And what I thought, my immediate thought when I read that was narcissism. And as you and I talk about, our entire country, our entire culture is narcissism. Narcissism and being involved in narcissism requires a constant self-abandonment, a constant questioning of oneself. I'm going to talk about this later when we talk about the 12 steps. And I think that's where the sickness comes from. That's the illness, is that it requires, as a child of a narcissist, it requires a constant self-abandonment in order to survive, right? And that's what fat people have to do. That's what people of color have to do all day long. Like this constant, like, oh, I'll just abandon myself, abandon all of my gut instincts, that like all of the bells and whistles that are going off. And this is what women have to do a lot. And we are assuming with absolutely 30, 40 minutes of research that Shannon Doherty was doing before she died an untimely death. in her
And
early 50s.
do you not find that all you are treating, if I could
Oh.
purchase a CPT code, if I could afford a CPT code, I would invent a new one that was just self-abandonment. I would make it
Yes.
free. I would make it free for everyone. You guys,
Yes.
the number is 50963 and it's free. And it would just be
free.
Self-abandonment, and that's all I treat.
That is all of
Fundamentally,
it.
all day long. That's what you're treating
That's
with addiction. It's
everything.
just a depression. Depression is definitely, that's all we're treating.
Of course.
All day long.
It's all it is.
I'm just like, just
It's-
stay with yourself. Like, just stay.
What is your experience? How do
Yes.
you feel? Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah. It's like when I watch, we have to, maybe we'll talk about it next time in Chit Chat, talk about the show Couples Therapy. One of the things I love about Orna and the way that she treats couples is that she will ask a question, and Carlo and I are both really good at being like, oh, they did the thing. So often men who may have narcissistic tendencies tend to answer with huge, broad generalizations, right? Like, well, I just think everybody should be happy. And it's like, no, bitch. What the hell does that even exactly? Like, no, what's your internal experience? Like, tell me what you want, what you think, what you believe, right? And so yes, but there's no space for that in our culture. So yeah, that is what everybody's suffering from.
No,
It's a lack of knowing.
Well,
what you feel.
if we started talking about everyone's internal experience, we'd have to, a lot of things in our culture wouldn't work anymore.
No. 0.001% of our culture would work. Yeah. And then you wanted to do a little teaser for next week's episode.
Speaking of toxicity.
Yes.
So I don't know if people know this. I do a bit of the anti-racism, anti-oppression activism.
Yes, you do.
In the social work space.
You try.
I try. Man,
they don't make it easy.
Speaking of mistakes, right? I've learned a lot. I've done it not well. I've done it anyway. I also just walk into it. I'm just doing something that I think is just very acceptable. And what did you say? Like, we just learn. Everything is just an adventure.
Yeah, right?
So
okay.
Yeah. What I walked into, because when you're doing anti-oppression, anti-racist work, you can make people very mad. People who are racist, like white people being above everyone else, they get upset with you.
Yeah. I'm familiar when I do fat phobic work.
Yeah, you're familiar with the people being mad at you. So we have to really work on our good girl, everyone likes me part to do this work.
Yes.
Anyway, little factoid. What I learned, people are mad at me for so many things. I'm only going to talk about a slice of this because I'm sure the people are listening to this very podcast looking for something to sue me about.
They might be.
They definitely are. Is that you cannot. So a lot of therapists want to, because we are learning about systemic racism, we know how horrific this field is for clinicians of color or any marginalized status, global majority status. It is harmful in supervision. But the ASWB exam is known to be racist, harmful to everyone. We try to address that by having pricing that is tiered and discounts for BIPOC people.
Yeah.
It turns out that is illegal, Paula.
That is wild to me.
It's discrimination. So I did it for a CEU workshop, and somebody white who is a leader in our profession, someone who molds young social work minds, was really worried that it was going to harm white people to have to pay more for this workshop, which was based on the honor system and self-selected. And she was very worried that white people would be harmed by my discount, even though it also said, if this trouble, if you need a further discount, you can just email me. I'll let you come, whatever. I just want people to learn the stuff about the. Yeah. Anyway, very angry with me. So I fixed it because I consulted and I was like, this can't be illegal. And then it turned out it is.
To be illegal.
So I made a little mistake, did a little illegality, which is amazing because I've never done anything illegal. I was like, this is my illegal thing. It's not even, if I was going to do something illegal, I'd want it to be fun. So then they reported, they were so mad. I fixed it. They acknowledged I fixed it. Said, good for you. Good for you. And then reported me to my continuing education provider people.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Who is the ASWB. They don't love me. due to many of the things I say about the race exam. Anyway, they took the report, and that's not going great. So anyway, we're finding some workarounds. It's going to lead to like greater alignment. As you know, I've learned that when something like this happens, I don't fight it anymore. I'm just like, oh, I guess I need to realign something. Anyway.
Okay, sure.
So don't give tiered pricing using protected classes if you are a clinician, even though it is because what is legal is not always moral. Anyway.
Correct. And what is legal is made up by dead white men. Yeah.
And this led us to think maybe we should have an episode on how deeply, which we will do next time, how deeply racist her profession is, which is not funny, but I have to it's so, the tactics and the approaches are so beyond wild.
Yes.
That we have to laugh to survive any of it. But we're going to talk about it because I think it's important for people to understand this is a deeply racist profession and you have to be careful out there. Be careful out there. And we're going to give some tips for how to find therapists that are not going to racially harm you further or
they don't participate in any. Yeah. I mean, the profession itself was invented by white women, which is,
white men, really. And then.
Right. But I mean, social work was invented by white women in the right. Psychology was invented by white men. Social work was invented by white women. Right. And nobody's good. Nobody's bad. It's all morally neutral. It's just, we want to be lovingly curious about the ways in which something started and the ways in which people are taking responsibility, as Lisa and I are talking about, for how it still harms people, or the vibrations that are still a part of the field and the teaching and the social work programs that are still being so we're going to talk about all of that.
And then just because somebody has a website that says I'm inclusive, everyone is welcome here, you need to dig a little deeper into our friends. You may want to dig a little deeper into some of our friends out there before you sign up for therapy with them, which we're going to get into later.
Okay, so we're going to talk about sobriety. This is a topic that obviously people come to us thinking about, talking about. Like I said earlier, I love that it is such a more nuanced conversation than it was. So many of you know, but most of you don't. Lisa and I met working at an outpatient drug and alcohol clinic in downtown Washington, D.C. on K Street in 2011.
2011-ish. It would have 12-ish. We were in group supervision together.
We were with a supervisor that did not resonate with me. I'm going to say it that way.
There was much about that place that did not resonate with us. We used to have to do our case consultations or paperwork or in a closet.
Literally in a closet.
Literally
in a closet.
My desk was like this. They had to order a desk for me, and I think it was like this big and anyway.
There was a point right before. It is now, it seems like such a fever dream and an acid trip. Like, what the hell was happening? There was a time I remember at the end. So this is right before I got so what happens is you get your degree, you go to grad school, you get your degree, and then you have to work somewhere for a few years and get all your hours before they let you go and get your LC in our biz. But psychologists are the same thing. You have to get all these hours before you're allowed to practice on your own and be your own independent contractor. So they pay people $0. I
believe we were paid $20 an hour.
I got $30,000 a year. Oh, great. In 2011 in Washington, D.C., one of the most, great. Yeah. I also got in trouble because I will never get over this. I didn't dress professional enough on my $30,000 a year salary. How dare I wear Old Navy slacks? You're paying me $30,000 a year. First of all, I will never wear slacks again because gross. But also, I could not get over. I was so angry when I got called out for not looking professional enough.
And you were not the only one. I don't know how I didn't, because we all know how I dress. I do think I dress nicer then, but you are the only reason I probably survived that whole situation, because it was so literally, I don't think people understand. And this is, I think, pretty typical. I mean, I worked in a rehab in a prison. That's a whole situation. But in no rehab setting do they provide any time for you to like eat lunch or stop or go to the bathroom or like think. There's no way this is healing for anyone. And we would like, I have 5 minutes to like rush down the street, get food, come back, eat my lunch in a team meeting where everyone else is only eating carrots, which I could never understand.
Broccoli with lemon juice on top. There was a woman
why
who
is
ate
no one
broccoli with lemon
eating?
juice. Zero food.
We are like working, running, you're never stopping. I was starving and I'm like looking around. I'm like, no one else is eating anything. And you were the only person that would like talk like like you were just like, he's clinically adorable. I love him. His thing is he needs friends. And I'd be like,
this guy needs friends. Totally.
Thank God, because this is wild.
I remember at the end, right before I quit, I had 67 clients or patients. We called them patients. I had 67 patients that I was in charge of. I got out of grad school 30 seconds ago. I had no idea what I was doing. I was wearing Old Navy slacks.
You were dressing terribly, Paula.
I was dressing terribly. And I had 67 addicts that I was in charge of.
And let's do the math. How big were your groups? My groups were usually, they were co-led groups, right?
Yeah.
So let's do the economic math on rehab. By the way, there is a book. I really wish I could remember the title. It's not, I don't know where it went. There's a book on how rehab is basically a scam. And I do think it's worth it. It probably helps 5%, maybe 2% of people that come through.
Maybe 10%.
Who need just like a stop, some kind of, but like the idea that it is healing or, but if we do the math on 60, like in a group, I think usually we were averaging 15, would you say?
Yeah,
15 patients, which is a not appropriate number for a group. Yalom says it should be 8. And there'd be 2 clinicians, and then we had a psychiatrist and then a roving psychiatric nurse practitioner. If you do the math on how much money they were making while paying you and I $40 and charging everyone in that group $100 each, I believe is what they were billing.
Yeah.
It is obscene.
It's pretty obscene. Yeah. And there's also the part that you and I were talking about earlier about the fact that so I had, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. I went to an inpatient treatment center. I went to rehab when I was 21 years old for an eating disorder, not for a drug and alcohol problem. And I had been in 12 steps already for a decade. So I was down. I like knew the lingo and stuff, but it was so covert and weird. And we were trained to be so ambiguous when our patients were like, wait, are you sober? We were supposed to be like, tell me why you want to know that. Like,
and the whole like, well, do I have to have cancer to treat cancer? I remember that one. And I think I bought into that at the time because it was like, how do I justify being employed here? But I always felt like
so weird.
Something about this feels weird. And then people were running into their clients at the bar. Totally. And that was, and then that was like, and it reminds me of like, this discussion we've been having about like if somebody says something racist, do you say like, hey, I'm a therapist who's not really into racism? Yeah. And that like we were taught to be like blank, but is that ethical? Like this new
Well, we were taught to be like blank, but also if I did run into a client at a bar and I knew my client was supposed to be sober, I would feel bad. So I was holding all of the shame, but like I am not in rehab. Like I don't have to be sober.
And why did we think they couldn't tolerate, right? Like the conflict, but I really felt like we shouldn't say it there. Like we would have been like but so anyway, it's this wild, and I am sometimes like, should you be sober if you're getting people? I mean, now that I will say now I do a lot of addiction work privately, and now I am sober. It is easier to get people sober when you're sober. I'm not going to lie. Either it's spiritual, it's energetic. I don't know. It's a lot easier.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I've had lots of clients come to me for eating disorder treatment that were like, I had an eating disorder therapist and she was fine, but she had never had an
Yeah.
eating disorder. So she didn't really get it, which is
Yeah.
fine. I don't think it's unethical or that you can't be effective if you've never suffered with it. I just think that there's a level of understanding and a level of like having, again, your lived internal experience of it where it's a little bit different. Can you tell I love your sobriety story. Can you tell your sobriety story?
So I accidentally got sober in the pandemic.
Which is nobody.
It's how I opened my stand-up set when I tried stand-up comedy.
I love it.
Because I developed high blood pressure after having my kids that kind of never resolved. I had like preeclampsia, whatever. And and the doctor was kind of like, we can't figure out why your blood pressure is high. And like drinking is not helpful for that. But I wasn't like, I guess in AA, they would say I had is it a high bottom? Because like my drinking wasn't otherwise problematic, but it was just kind of like, I have 2 young kids. I was also like, I'm getting older. This doesn't feel great on my body.
Yeah.
Like it probably isn't doing me any favors. And so, and it took me, I'm not going to lie. It took I think it took many attempts. I was using apps. I was trying all the tricks, and I'm somebody who like can get people, I've been spending it. I was like, why is this so hard? I know how to do this. But it was, I would get tripped up socially. I just couldn't, it was like the social. So then the pandemic came and it was so easy because there was no,
zero social pressure.
Yeah. So I had like I probably tried 5 or 6 times and kind of went back. And each time I quit, I would quit for longer. And then, and then the pandemic happened and it was like, so I just quit drinking. And then after 6 months, I was like, I love this. Why?
Awesome.
I look at alcohol now. I think there's been 2 times I've actually been like, a drink would not be horrible. Around the death of my father, there was some moments where I was like, sure. Usually around like the people when you're dealing with that. But beyond that, it like turns, I don't know what happened to me subconsciously, but I'm like, all I think about is like how terrible it's going to make. It just doesn't sound good. So, and I read a lot of Quit Lit, but I accidentally got sober. And then what I think people don't know is that even if you drink like once a week, twice a week, there is something clouding about that, even when you're not drinking. And so then once I was sober, it was like all these things that had been acceptable to me were not acceptable to me anymore. Like things, there was it was just like things I had tolerated. Things, again, like not knowing my lived experience. Because I think even when you're sober, if you know you can numb out, you're like, I can put up with that because I'm going to have some wine later. And it just, I was like, and I really took to heart the Quit Like a Woman. I love the framework in this book around we have to create a life we don't want to escape from. To stop. And I was like, I'm on board. And I just did it all. But don't get sober if you don't want to see things clearly, because wow. And then don't become a psychic, because geez.
Because then you pick up everything.
Yeah. I even had a sober friend, because I did have a bit of a like, at the end of the pandemic, a bit of a burnout, whatever we want to call it. And I went and saw this old improv friend of mine who's been sober like 1.5 million years. And she was like, you got sober what is wrong with you? She was so mad at me. She was like, who gets sober in a pandemic with 2 small children? Well, of course you're having a nervous breakdown. I was like, she's like, what are you doing instead? You can't just like stop. And I was like, oh, that's a fair point. I took away my one coping skill. She's like, yeah, it does calm you down. Like, what did you replace it with? And I was like, nothing. I just white knuckled it.
You're like that tweet that like, are you just raw dogging reality? Oh my God.
She was like so mad at me. She was like, you can't do that. I had no improv. It was really like this sober person being like, who does that? But that's I have to say, I love it. I'm in. It's been amazing. And Emily from the Indigo Girls is sober. She was a horrible alcoholic. I didn't know that.
Oh, she was a horror. Yeah, and Amy helped her get sober because Amy had the intervention on her.
But they almost broke up. We almost
Amy
lost
and Emily are the lead singers of the Indigo Girls, by the way. We talk about them like we're friends.
But
so
we
just
almost lost the Indigo Girls to alcoholism.
We almost lost Emily.
When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, my heart stopped. So anyway.
Yeah. I love that. I love that story. I love all of it. It makes so much sense. The whole, like, you have to create a life you don't want to have to get wasted in. that makes so much sense to me. That's what I used to say when we worked at the drug and alcohol clinic. I would teach the artist way to the patients, and they would be so baffled. And I was like, if you're going to get sober and you're not going to have any fucking joy in your life, like, what are we doing? And they would always say things like, how am I supposed to go to, some like happy hour with a bunch of lawyers because it's downtown DC and everybody's a goddamn lawyer? And I'd be like, maybe you won't go to the happy hour. That sounds terrible. Like, if you're doing things that the only way you can get through them is being drunk, you could just not do those things.
And that's what happens to people. And that's what happened. That's what's scary to people. And I do the improv stuff when I was there, I would do like improv. And it was where I was like, you have to let joy in. Like, you have to find some way to have, which I forgot for myself because we were also in a pandemic. There was no source of joy. But
there was no fun.
I forgot for a minute. I had a little memory lapse. But yeah, I'm that's what I work with everybody on. I'm like, don't even worry about the drinking. What's going on that you have no access to pleasure in your life? And we just work on that. And then suddenly they're like, yeah, I don't really need that anymore. I mean, it's like everything they taught us about dealing with addiction is so wrong. Because they got it right. I mean, I know.
Yeah, of course he's not bad. He just hates fat people. Yeah. And my story's different. Where I got sober when I went to rehab, because again, I went for an eating disorder, but we had to be sober. So I was sober for like 8 years. And then I started drinking again when I relapsed in France at a winery. Happens.
We don't fault you for that. Did you go to the dentist too while you were there? Did you go to the dentist?
Right. I should have gone to the dentist. No, that's before my teeth started falling out from my eating disorder. So I still had my teeth were great at that point. So then I started drinking again, and then I got sober again so I've been sober like for 8 years and then for 7 years. And then when I moved to California, I didn't mean to get sober, and I'm not sober. But I just don't, it's so fascinating, the vibrations of DC, which I never felt like I fit in, and it just was never my vibe. I have such a different relationship with alcohol now. And it's like, it used to feel like I did need it, and I didn't need it. I was fine, but it felt like more of like the desire felt stronger.
Because you're like, this here.
Yes. And now I like forget. And then it's such a different vibration. And it reminds me of the thing I always say, which I now know to be true in so many instances, which is infinite permission equals infinite choice. So if I have infinite permission I'm allowed to get drunk all day long if I want. I'm allowed to eat nothing but peanut M&Ms all day long. Infinite permission means infinite choice. And that is the opposite of the way that we treat addiction, because we treat addiction in this way of like shame and guilt. And I always say to my clients, if you want to ensure that you will participate in a behavior that you're not enjoying, make sure you make yourself feel like shit about it. Because then you will have to, again, participate in the behavior that you're not even enjoying in the first place.
Yeah. And the women figured that out. That's part of, I think, what helped me. Because when everything came from men, the AA, the abstinence only, the like beat yourself up. You have to call yourself. And I still, when I went to an AA meeting to get my 4-year chip just because I wanted to. But I don't go regularly, but I pop in. I mean, I grew up in Al-Anon because I like many things about the 12 steps. And there is such a, like, you have to say, and I didn't want to say I was an alcoholic. It didn't feel true. I was like, it doesn't feel accurate. It had so much baggage for me because of who the alcoholics, I mean, I don't even know if I believe in that term anymore, but like what it meant to me in my family lineage, I was like, that is not, I just couldn't say it. And so for years I was like, well, I guess I can't get sober because I'm not an alcoholic. And I literally felt, it was literally like, I have to keep drinking, I guess, because I don't have, and then our friend Kate, who God bless, she was like, Kate Times. I am just going to get sober. And I watched her, and then all this quit lit from the women that were like, you can do it with sober curious. Don't do it with deprivation. And by the way, you don't have to be an alcoholic. You can just be like, this is patriarchal bullshit and it's hurting my body and it doesn't feel good. And this is a way of numbing out capitalism. And I was like, hallelujah. Oh,
Yes.
That is me. I can own that.
Yes.
And it was,
Yes.
and so I also just like, don't underestimate also the influence of like other people that get sober and like talking to them. Like I would go talk to Kate and be like, what are you doing? Like, and she was just like living her, and we talk, I mean, it doesn't, because it also, we were taught like, you have to go to AA. You can't get sober without AA. You have to do it this way. And I'm always like, everybody gets sober. I've never seen anyone get sober the same way in this with the same things.
And the binary of like either you're sober or you're an alcoholic, and you have to be an alcoholic. I've had so many clients who are like, well, I kind of want to quit, but I don't think I'm that bad. I'm like, well, does it kind of suck? You're allowed to stop if it kind of sucks.
And you don't like yes. And no one was saying that. There was no until Quit Like a Woman. And also Alan Carr's book is really good at the subconscious piece. And he also is like, keep drinking. Just read this book while you're drinking. And by the end, you're like, I don't want to do this. What is he doing? I don't know. It's very effective to tell somebody to keep drinking.
It's great. Well, but you also realize, I think and my friend Matt, shout out to Matt, when he got sober, he started, because everybody talks about, and I do want to talk a little bit about 12 steps specifically, but he is my dear friend. He was born Mormon, no longer Mormon, and then got into 12 steps and had all of these bells and whistles go off around the culty parts and was like, it's a cult, it's not a cult, blah, blah, blah. And then he started noticing the cultiness of alcohol culture, alcohol cult in our culture, in our society, and how capitalism robs us of fun and play and joy and expansion and spirituality, and then is in its place is like, here, have a fucking beer. And it's like, we have no joy, we have no fun, we have no rest. We have no relaxation. We have no connection. We have no place to just connect to our inner child and our joy. Yeah. But we do have booze because it makes somebody fucking money. And alcohol helps us tolerate the intolerable. We're fed alcohol because it helps us tolerate all of this nonsense.
Which, by the way, parallels narcissistic abuse, which is about tolerating. And the women figured out, all these women writing all of this Quit Lit are the ones that figured out this piece around, if you say no, I don't want to buy the alcohol, I'm going to have this nice seltzer water, the universal drink of all sober people everywhere. Then everybody goes, oh, I guess you're an alcoholic. Literally, if I were like, I'm going to stop smoking, I think I'm going to give up heroin, I think maybe I'm not going to eat like Cheetos, everybody claps and gives you a parade.
Applause. Yeah.
And when these women started seeing that, I was like so angry.
Yes.
I was like, this is, because it is true. The minute when you're sober, people act weird. I mean, I don't care anymore, but it's like people do kind of act weird. They get uncomfortable, and people try to talk you into. I'm like, and I say to people now, I'm like, it's a toxin. It's a toxin.
It is poison. Like, that's why it makes your brain so funny.
About, oh, what's this about? I'm like, it's a toxin. I don't want cancer. We're gonna find out it's cigarettes causing cancer. I don't judge anyone who's doing it, but if you start coming for me around, oh, why? I'm like, oh no.
Right. Absolutely not. Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about 12 steps because I have such a complicated relationship with it. And I know a lot of my clients do too. So one thing that I love to point out is that the history of the 12 steps is interesting. Number one, Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, incredibly smart, but also very privileged white men. They read the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, all of it. And they sort of did this research project on their own to see what were the things that stood out in terms of it's so male, how to make the dumbest, most drunk person have a spiritual experience. I think that's so rad. And so then that's how they built the 12 steps of like, how can we make any dipshit drunk guy have a spiritual experience? And that's the 12 steps, which is super cool. I think that's cool.
Side note that is important because the 12 step culture, part of it is, I mean, they will tell people to get off their Zoloft, which makes me bananas. Horrified. Because there is this purity culture in it, which is not everywhere. You can go to the 12 steps and take your Zoloft, but there is a, just like with anything large, there is a faction. He was doing LSD. He did Michael Pollan's documentary. They were freaking high. So do not come with your purity. I'm just like, no, he was high, which is fine. I don't judge it.
Right.
But it's important that we
Well, the
know
intersection
the whole
of
context.
toxic Christianity and 12 steps, there's a very deep, terrible intersection there, and patriarchy, all of it. But yes, in Bill Wilson's documentary, My Friend Bill, they have it in the documentary that he was doing LSD.
Yeah.
He did it, I mean, especially
So if
after
anybody tells you to get off your Zoloft, remind them that Bill Wilson
loved
derived
acid.
AA with some help of all these books and probably
Yes.
some information from the shrooms.
Yes.
Come on.
Of course. So that's cool. And I love that. And my personal experience is that I loved the 12 steps because I was an only child. And so I loved that there were groups, and I'm an Aquarius. So I loved that there were groups. And it also gave me the first place, because I was like this weird kid who was obsessed with God and church and stuff. And I had this narcissistic, alcoholic, atheist father. And then I had this closeted spiritual person mother. And so I used to go to Baptist church with the next door neighbor because I just wanted to go to church so bad. I was so curious about, and there was no internet, so I was so curious about God and religion and stuff. So it was the first time.
I was the same way. It's weird we became therapists.
I think that there's a
is there a cult profession I could join?
Right? Is there totally? And so the going to rehab and then going to 12 steps was the first place where I felt like I got to be like unabashedly spiritual, and it was like I got to be, and my excuse was it was like saving my life because I was dying of starvation, etc. So that was really good for me. And it was always interesting to me working at the drug and alcohol clinic. And when I hear from clients that they don't like it because of the spiritual part, and I'm like, that's the only good part. The rest of it sucks, but that part is great. So, the other part of it that I talk about with clients so much, and it's so interesting that obviously the clients that have mixed feelings about 12 steps gravitate towards me because I was in it for 17 years and then I am no longer in it, although it holds such a special place in my heart because I say, and I believe it, that 12 steps raised me and it really did save my life. Yeah. And because I felt like I was such a free range kid, I was such a Gen X kid, I never got like, don't tell a lie, be on, like these like tenets that happen in 12-step rooms that like nobody told me any of that. And it was the first place where somebody was like really interested in me developing a character, like actual character, not a character. Yeah. So this is the way I think about it in my mind in terms of like being there and then getting out of it. And I hope this is helpful. So because to recover from the addiction, right? And I'll put that in quotes. And as Gabor Mate says, it's not actually, he doesn't like that. Like the addiction is the solution. Like we were just saying, alcohol is the solution to living in capitalism. You know, for most of us, the addiction is the solution to whatever pain we're experiencing. And the addiction is a commitment to, like we were talking about earlier, abandoning yourself so that you survive. You have to then abandon yourself to the 12 steps, right? To your sponsor, to your higher power, et cetera, because you can't trust yourself anymore. And this is my experience because I couldn't trust myself anymore because I couldn't make myself fucking eat. And so you give yourself over to the group or to your higher power, et cetera. And that is how you survive. That's literally how you not die of your addiction, right? But because the group was made for and by privileged white men, humility is such a huge part of it. And that's the part I know that you and I talked about this after you went to that AA meeting, that like hitting the people over the head with like, you have to be humble part, like for the people it was made by and for, that's a huge part. But for women and people of color and queer people and like so many people, you don't have to beat them over the head with humility because they have to swallow themselves and abandon themselves all day long in order to survive in society. And that's the piece where I get real scratchy and I get real protective of my clients. So this is just something I was writing yesterday that I want to share. So I wrote, what I find is that this part is helpful as like urgent care, right? Like that triage part of like, I have to give up all my care. Just like if you're bleeding out of your eyeballs, you have to go to the hospital and you have to get blood infusion. But what I find is that this part is helpful at the beginning because you have to question yourself to survive. You have to give your power over or else you'll die. But at some point, that self-abandonment is not good. You can't do that forever. You can't stay in kindergarten forever. You can't stay in urgent care forever. So then I have so many clients who try to stay in that constant state of like being suspicious of themselves and in this constant state of like questioning my motives. And maybe that's just the addiction talking, and maybe I'm just being an addict, and maybe, right. And then then you stay stuck in that phase. And especially for women, I feel like, because we're already so used to questioning ourselves because the entire culture tells us to question ourselves constantly, that piece comes so easily to us. And then we stay in that place, giving our power over to the group, giving our power over to the 12 steps, etc. And then you kind of stay there. And that's the place where I feel like I have clients come to me and they're in such a state of shame because they're like, well, I don't know if this works for me anymore. And there's so much, they're dripping with shame when they say that. And I'm like, of course it doesn't work for you anymore. Well, it's not supposed to.
Yeah. And AA tells them, right? There's something wrong. That's your ego. And
right, that's the addict
the
talking.
Culty part is that if AA just had it's like this sense of like, use, because what do they say? Take what you need and leave the rest. Which I love.
Yes.
If there was only a pithy saying for like, use this as long as it's helpful, and then trust yourself.
Yes.
Because it's like when because I love everything you're saying. I've never thought about it that way, but I think that is so true, and it keeps people stuck. And if you find the right sponsor, they can really make your world very small. And then we're right back to, because then it's like, oh, you can't date. You can't date in early sobriety. You can't do this. You can't have sex. That'll lead you. Well, God, you're not going to feel good. You can't do anything. And so and so I think it's like, and when I went to that meeting and I had to read, they passed me the thing to read and you never know where it's going to land. And I had never, and normally I will say this was the first AA meeting I've ever been to. I haven't been to like a ton, but I was like, I didn't like any of it really. And that's never happened. Usually many things are said where I'm like, yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah, totally.
Like, this was a little weird, but I had to read the thing that talked about like, if this isn't working for you, it's because there is something wrong with you. You are broken. Oh, yeah. That page.
Constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself.
Constitutionally, that page is so it is very antithetical to the theme of this podcast. And all I could think about was like my Vietnam veteran dad with horrific PTSD who was not offered any treatment when he got out of Vietnam. And and then did become, because he was coping with God knows what. I mean,
demons. Yes.
And reading that and thinking like, this is what I'm supposed to be saying to him. Like, you are this broken, constitutionally characterless. How is that?
Incapable of being honest with yourself. That's the only way the program won't work for you.
I'm like, that is just kind of
How can
harsh.
You know that?
It's a little more. I was like, this feels like a punitive. I hated saying those words. It felt like a punitive, mean parent. And then everybody, and it's not every meeting reads that, right? So as a group therapist, I'm thinking about, we read that. This whole meeting was all these people, like, I think that's why I didn't like it. They were just kind of beating up on themselves and doing the like, this is what I don't trust about myself. They were, and I don't know, maybe that set the stage, but there's a side of it that is, side of it that is so beautiful. It has saved the lives of people in my family. It has saved and there is a side of it that is just dark. And like, you gotta have some nuance. And I do think like people going back, I think it can be helpful to remember why you got sober, like, because we can forget and hearing stories. You're like, oh, that's all right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But, I think especially for women and for anyone deeply traumatized, it really, I think, is designed. If you're a narcissist, if you're a grandiose narcissist, great. Probably all of it.
Well, and if you read the big book, every man, the story are all about men, and every man in that is a grandiose narcissistic alcoholic.
But if you are if you're an empath, or the victim of, like, if you were raised in a narcissistic household, or you're a woman, or you're a Black person, it's like none of that stuff is going to be great for you. It's going to be damaging.
You may not need to be there forever. Or what I always say to my clients of color, my queer clients, my gender nonconforming clients, my women clients is find a women's meeting, or find a meeting that's just for queer people, or find a meeting where there are no men. God bless you, cis men. There, but I think you'll be fine. And there are places you can go where it's not like there are now. I know that there are Artists Way themed Al-Anon and AA meetings in New York City. There are now Health at Every Size themed OA meetings, which is like my dream. I went to so many fucking OA meetings that were so awful. One of my friends who I met in OA 1,000 years ago, she reminded me that one of the the pithy sayings that I love, actually, and I have a list of my favorite slogans that I say all the time, but the one I hate was that they used to say in OA all the time was "Service is slimming."
What? Stop.
So gross.
Stop. You're making that up. You're making it up to horrify
I forgot.
this podcast.
No, I forgot. And my friend Hillary, I love you, Hillary, she reminded me that they used to say the service is slimming. Isn't that gross?
Shock. I am.
You have no idea.
Why would I be in shock? Actually, I was raised in the 80s. Why am I have been around you too long. I'm like, I'm shocked. Why am I shocked? That makes no sense. Of course they said that.
Oh my God. The fat phobic, awful, horrendous things that I heard in OA meetings in the late 90s and early 2000s. I wish I had recordings of all of it. It is just horrifying. But can I tell you some of my favorite slogans? These are some of the ones that are like I still say at least once a day. And my friend Josh, that when we first started hanging out after not hanging out for a few years, I would say them, and he's like, "These are so brilliant." Like, these are all just 12 steps.
AA slogans. And sometimes you can get a whole meeting just reading the wall.
Oh, like, so good.
The wisdom.
Oh, I'm in, right? So More Will Be Revealed is one that I say at least once a day because it's so antithetical to our anxious intellect worship culture, right? If you don't know what to do, don't do anything. Also genius, right? I love that which you worship becomes your God, which I don't think is originated from 12 steps, but I like it because of the people who are in the, stuck on the second step about like not believing in God and realizing that like, well, you don't have to believe in God, but you have to believe in something outside of your dumbass brain. It's about the food or the drink or the whatever until it's not about the drink. And that's what you're talking about like, oh, I just wanted to get sober. I didn't want to realize the inherent toxicity of everyone I've ever met. Turns out you're about to. And then the stick with the winners, which doesn't sound very kind, but like the vibration of that is like stick with your gut and like see who you gravitate towards and see who, it's like how you find a sponsor, like find somebody who has what you want and ask them how they get it. I find that I just said that to somebody this morning in terms of like, the boomers sort of taught us this lifestyle. And they were like, this is how you do it. And you go to college and you get a job and you buy a house and then you retire and blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about it in terms of like, I don't want what the boomers had. So why would I do my life the way they taught me to do it? So I was thinking about that.
Yeah, that's why I called up Kate. I was like, you are doing this in a way which I like.
Which looks so much more fun.
What are you doing?
Yeah, she's having fun.
And I will say her advice, which I do tell a lot of my patients, we're now outing where it came from, is I was like, how'd you do this? And she goes, I gave myself permission in the first year that I didn't drink that I could have anything else I wanted. Any ice cream, any like spending money, any treats, any massages. She said, I told myself I can have anything else I want. And that's what she did.
Genius.
And it should be an AA slogan. It should just be an AA slogan. Because that's the key.
It kind of is.
That's the key.
Well, it's in the big book that for the first year, eat as much candy as you need.
Yeah, and ice cream. No one will do it because nobody wants to gain weight. There's like that whole intersection we could go on about where I'm like, eat the ice cream. Eat it. Yeah. Everyone who gets sober wants the ice cream.
Ice cream and wants candy.
It's just how it goes. Unless you are a diabetic and it will kill you. Eat the freaking ice cream.
You will get sick of Sour Patch Kids. I swear to Christ. I said that to somebody. You will not want Sour Patch Kids every day of your life for the rest of your life. I promise. Just eat them now. Yeah. That is really genius. And I feel like it corresponds with my infinite permission thing, right? Yeah. Like infinite permission.
And you have to have pleasure. You have to figure out what makes me don't pandemic get sober. What do we want to call it? Pandemic sobriety? Don't do that. Like, don't do deprived
Don't do that.
sobriety. You'll have a nervous breakdown at the end, and your friend Eileen will yell at you.
Well, but it's also, I think it also is such a good indication too, because then it makes you realize that we've been using alcohol as a poor substitute for actual pleasure, for actual fun,
because
for
it's
actual
not.
play.
I mean, once you are free from it, and sometimes you have to go. It's like, it's really not pleasurable. I mean, in my experience, it is not pleasurable.
I mean, like I've had lots of fun times, but like I also recognize that there are times when I told myself I was having fun, I really wasn't having that much fun.
Or you pay for the fun on the other. Like I was tired, like that weird pain behind your eyes, even if you're not hungover. You know what I mean? Like I was always like, is it entirely pleasurable? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Right. And making sure that it is, right? Like follow the fun. If it's really fun, great. If it's not fun, don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And letting yourself look at both. And I love this whole sobriety culture we have now of Sober Curious. We have so many tools invented by all these women, to which I am infinitely grateful.
And all the Gen Z babies don't want to drink. Like so many of the Gen Z babies are like, no, it's gross. I don't want to do that. Yeah. And they're like, I'll have gummies instead, which is great.
Yeah.
Good.
Just, oh my God.
Marijuana is so much better for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't do it, but some people can. Yeah. Anything else on sobriety? I feel like we just slayed that topic.
I feel like we really killed that. I have no further notes.
If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. That's my motto for all of life. Like if it's fun, then keep doing it. If you're not having fun, you don't have to do it. Yeah. It's not good or bad. Like keeping it all morally neutral. It is all morally neutral.
Yeah. It's so, yeah. Alcoholism is another myth. It's just, it's a bit of a construct and a myth that is not super helpful. But if it's helpful for you, use it. It's all complicated. Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I have clients who like really identify as alcoholics and and it's like, great, that's okay. Again, if it works for you, do it. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. And don't make rules for anybody else. Yeah. That's basically what we're saying.
I go to AA and refuse to call myself an alcoholic, and it annoys everyone, and I don't care.
That's fine. They're fine. I think they'll be fine. If you have any thoughts, listeners, about sobriety, about getting sober, about not being sober, about your relationship with alcohol or drugs or any mind-altering substance. The other thing that I learned from our friend Mike Giordano. In my mind, it's always Giordano, and he's saying it wrong. But I think he's saying his name correct.
That's a pizza. Paula. That's not Mike. You're thinking of DiGiorno's.
Oh, DiGiorno pizzas. That is probably what I'm thinking of. What I learned from him, which I love and I say to my clients all the time, is everything you ingest is a mind-altering substance. Literally everything you ingest is a mind-altering substance. So all of our morality and all of our, this is the good kind and this is the bad kind. Nope. It's all, what is your internal experience, and let that be your guide.
I love that.
Yeah.
Including toxic people. Toxic people. Back full circle. I'm going to do it every time. It's my quest. Toxic people are a mind-altering substance. Use with caution. There should be a black label warning, which actually Dr. Remini has written a book that is a black label warning of toxic people.
On narcissistic people. And please give us some thumbs up. Press the, this is hard for me every time. Press the bell, press the thumbs up on YouTube. Can you go to your Apple Podcast app right now and just give us a little review and give us how many stars you think we deserve? That would be great. That would mean a lot to us. And if you have on Instagram, I am Paula D. Atkinson. Lisa is the Lisa Kays. If you want to tell us something that you're curious about in terms of like therapists and what therapists think about this, we would love to do an episode on it.
I have nothing further.
Okay, that's all I had to say right now. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.